Hello, guys. Minuteman here, and I'm with the Cold War Patriot, um, who is also my father. Um, Real quick, I'm going to go ahead and preference this. This is audio only, and I'll again supplement it with some photos. And I'm kind of going to title these things BSing with Dad. Um, and hopefully my intent with this is we're going to discuss things that, struggles about being in the Guard, different challenges of being in the Guard, how I plan to be a better soldier, a better officer. Um, and this is coming from perspective of father and son, but I also have the added benefit of this is junior officer speaking with a senior officer. And hopefully this will bring in a different perspective because, yeah, you can go to your company commander and talk to him about how to develop yourself professionally. And that relationship is going to be professional and it probably will be big brother to little brother. But this is from father to son. And maybe it'll give a different perspective than you might get from your company commander, especially because the Cold War Patriot is a full bird, so a little higher than the train tracks. Um, so with this episode is kind of the pilot, the introduction, and I'm going to discuss reflecting on my time in the Guard, my expectations versus reality, how I saw it as I was growing up, what it looked like from the outside, challenges that I faced, and a plan to face as I continue in this career, especially now no longer being a non-commissioned officer, but becoming a commissioned officer, and my plan and commitment to overcome those, because that's a crucial part. In the Guard, we make all these plans. We can sit there during drill weekend and say, yes, I see the future. These are the things I need to take care of come next month. And then we've got 28 days of non-commitment. And then we show up and then nothing happens because we didn't take the time to commit to it. And this is my way of committing to myself, you guys, and my future soldiers by putting it on record somewhere where I can be held accountability. But with that being said, Cold War Patriot, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so hey, thanks, Minuteman. Thanks for having me on again. I have to admit, I really, really enjoy doing this with you. I would like to say that congratulations on completing OCS. I can't tell you how proud I am of that accomplishment. The things that you had to endure were the worst that the Army could possibly throw at you. As a graduate of Ranger School, I can say that with confidence that seeing what you had to do to earn your commission was every bit as challenging as Ranger School or any other uh, challenge that the Army or the military could throw at you. So I can't tell you how proud I am, and congratulations.
Appreciate that. And I guess I think about that as well. This was not just a leadership school. I believe they refer to it as a senior leadership school. And isn't that what Ranger School is referred to as well as a senior leadership school?
It is. I mean, there's lots of different adjectives to describe the leadership nature of Ranger School training, but fundamentally, it is a leadership school. It's not just about leadership though. It's about, and again, I have no doubt that you experienced this in OCS as well. It's about what can you do as a leader when everything is stacked against you, when you're hungry, tired, wet. So the reason we describe it as a leadership school, the reason we describe OCS as a leadership school, is because if you can get the job done under the worst of conditions, there's only one way to really do that. You have to be the best leader that you can be. And that's what the intent of these schools are, is to show you. And some people learn that they don't have it in them, and that's okay. That's okay. I mean, if you go there and find out you don't have that ability, then that school has worked, right?
Yeah.
And I know it stings. I know that you were a little concerned about meeting the challenge. I personally knew you had it in you, but there are some that don't, and it's okay to learn that lesson. But at the end of this, the men and women who complete schools like that should take the opportunity to reflect and say, you know what, I do have what it takes to stand in front of America's sons and daughters and lead them to get the job done.
Yeah.
So anyway, again, congratulations.
I appreciate it. And certainly I agree. So I've already kind of done, they're not up yet, but I've done some videos on OCS and talking about how to prepare for it. And when I was trying to prepare for it, reaching out to other people, one lieutenant said, and I'm not going to tell you everything because it sucks to suck, nerd. And I was like, okay. He's like, also, if I told you all the answers, it would defeat the purpose of you going to the school to be assessed to be this person. And I understand where he's coming from now. At the time, I was like, well, it sucks. But he has a point. If all of us who've completed schools in the Army were to get online and show you the answer book, why would the school even exist? I will help you and advise you as best I can in preparation for the school. But if it turns out that you're not the one for this at the current moment, maybe you need to go back home, train up, mature, do whatever you need to do. Then, like my father pointed out, the school's worked.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, just because not everyone's ready for that challenge at that particular moment in time, and
Right.
and it's okay to realize that and reflect on it because, frankly, our soldiers deserve people who are committed and have proven their worth, whether it's stripes or bars.
Yeah.
Right? Our soldiers. I mean, we have a professional responsibility to give our soldiers the very best leadership that we can, and sometimes that means realizing I don't have what it takes.
Right. And that personal courage and not only personal courage, but the ability to look at yourself existentially, not interpersonal tact, understanding who you are, and being able to assess yourself in that current moment, and being able to say, not saying that I can't do it, because that's the wrong thing to say, but I'm not ready, or I need some outside resources to help me with this situation.
And I got to tell you, I'm really quite jealous. Right? So I didn't have this challenge when I'm an ROTC commission source. I didn't have these challenges. The first time that I really experienced what the Army was like was when I went to airborne school. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know if I was going to be a good leader or not, and frankly, probably hadn't given it much thought. I said, I want to be a leader in the Army, and ROTC just taught me the very, very basics. The first time I was assessed on my ability to truly lead was Ranger School, right? And I wish I had. Well, I'm not sure I say that. It's easy to say that now. I'm not sure I wish I had gone to OCS, but when you reached out a few times and you described the challenges that you were enduring, I walked away from those phone calls going, you know what, this is exactly what I was hoping he would learn,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's a little trite to say, but there's a quote by a Greek general and historian called Thucydides, and it says, make sure I don't misquote this. One person is much the same as any other, but they who are best are trained in the severest of schools. And, that's... So I am jealous, right? You know coming out of that you have what it took. It took me much longer to get to that point. And I looking at what you did, I kind of reflect on, I wish I'd kind of done that myself. So.
I was thinking about that on the drive over here in more of a vain perspective. I was thinking about all the ribbons I have compared to an ROTC guy who probably has one or two.
If any.
Right. But I was thinking about the difference between me and an ROTC person. I've been in the Guard for 3 years. So I didn't do it full time. I did a fair amount in those 3 years. But having that time to serve and be within the formation, holding a junior leadership position, gone to an Army leadership school prior to this, and then going through OCS, I don't know if it really has made me a good officer. I'm not an officer at this point. I haven't been commissioned yet. But one thing that OCS has taught me is when everything else is on fire around me, I can still stand in front of people and take in information, make the best possible decision I can at that current moment with the information that I have. And then when I go to execute, I don't fall in on myself when it continues to burn. Because once you start panicking and abandon that initial plan, it's going to get worse. As long as you have some sort of skeletal structure of a plan, you can build off it as it falls apart.
Yeah, this is a perennial rule in the military, certainly within the Army. And it comes up in history repeatedly about that sort of that, what's the role of the officer on the battlefield? And fundamentally, the officer is responsible for two things: clear, unambiguous, executable intent. This is what I want you to do, and the resources to do it. And in World War II, it was called the rule of LGOPS, little groups of paratroopers, right? And there's this rule, I don't remember who came up with it, so I'm a little ashamed to admit that, but it's, there's this terrifying thing that happens on the battlefield when young Americans who are without leadership execute their mission, and they remember that one thing from their commanding officer, and it's at every level, platoon, company, up through brigade, division. It's that, what did my boss tell me he wanted me to do? And if I only remember that, then I'll get the job done.
Yep.
And it's the officer, being an officer, you get a lot of derision from sometimes from the enlisted ranks, because it's supposedly a cushy lifestyle on this type of thing, and there's certainly some truth to that, depending on the time or the MOS or what your job is, right? Absolutely. But when you are in that leadership role, there's no phone a friend, right? There's no left and right. There's this scene in Saving Private Ryan where Tom Hanks' character hits the beach, and he looks at the NCO or soldier next to him and he says, "Who's in charge?" And the soldier sees that he's wearing those railroad tracks. He's a captain. He goes, "You are, sir." And that's the way it is. And being an officer means that, hey, it's up to me to do it. And again, these leadership schools we have are designed to demonstrate, not only to yourself, but to the cadre and everyone else. And okay, does this person have that in them to do?
Right. And to build off that, Tom Hanks' character, well and truly that he is in charge. And so now it doesn't matter how much information you have or whether or not you think you can do it. You got put in that command position, and now that is your responsibility.
It is.
Everything that formation fails or succeeds to do is on your shoulders, and it doesn't matter how prepared you are.
It doesn't even necessarily matter what decision you make, as long as it's not, as long as it's consistent with the rules of engagement and other guidance. But I hate to quote another fictional movie, but there's the movie for the Battle of Los Angeles, where the staff sergeant was talking to his platoon leader, his lieutenant, and he says, "Hey, sir, I don't care what you do. Go left, go right. Just make that decision, and we'll follow your lead." And now, competency is an issue, right? I mean, an officer is expected to understand our doctrine, and I personally have a problem with, leaders who say that, well, I don't necessarily need to know our doctrine, and that excuses their unwillingness to do the homework and to do the research. But doctrine is the baseline that we choose to deviate from. If I'm in a particular engagement, I'm on a patrol, a movement of contact, I know what my doctrine says. And I'm going to set conditions so that when we begin that mission, we're going to, we're prepared for it. Now, when it all goes to poop, right, you got to be flexible. But that underlying competency is what sets the stage for a unit's ability to successfully complete missions.
Yeah, that sparked a thought in my head. In preparation for something like OCS, you do not know everything that you need to do with an OCS to pass, but you can figure out the fundamentals to essentially be the doctrine. These are the things I need to have. And once you have that baseline set, that doctrine set, when everything falls apart and you've had a solid foundation, when you're free falling through all that, you can sometimes, if you think about it enough, if you don't panic, you'll land on your feet.
That's exactly right. It's the Army training model. There's a reason why you spend 3 weeks learning how to jump out of an airplane, so that when you finally do it, it's on automatic. You go back to that foundational training to be able to execute the task properly, right? And leadership is no different, right? You have to know the doctrine. Because when it all, as a matter of fact, I think I learned this lesson as a second lieutenant while I was in Ranger School, and the RI was a staff sergeant, and I have never seen anyone give an op order as beautifully. It was art to watch the staff sergeant give an op order, and I did a patrol, and I failed my patrol. And the NCO was giving me my brief, and he's like, "Oh, Ranger, you failed your patrol because you didn't follow our doctrine. Your plan was non-doctrinal." And I remember looking at him going, "Is that important?" And of course it was. There was a reason why that NCO was telling me that, is because this is the foundation. So that when you're in combat, and as you know, I went to combat many times. When you're in combat and you can't think, you're on. What you always fall back to instinctively is, this is what I've been trained to do, and almost always it gets you, it helps you get to the other side.
So like gets you close to what right should look like.
Yeah, I think at the end state it almost certainly guarantees the mission success. It could be ugly. It can be ugly, right? I mean, the D-Day invasion is a classic example of that. Yeah. I mean, everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, and at the end of the day, they still pulled it off.
And to quote people who we can't really quote, there's this Soviet general who was talking about the Cold War, specifically towards the end, and he was reflecting on how he always felt it was really challenging on how he would plan to defeat the Americans, because he knew what the American playbook was. He saw the doctrine. It's all public knowledge. But he was like, if I do something, he recognized that even at the lowest level, at the team lead level, that leader could go ahead and take commander's intent and then do some crazy stuff and hopefully defeat him. Things that he could not envision, because there was a motivated American behind that weapon.
And that American, that soldier, is armed with a couple of things. One, he understands his commander's intent. My boss told me what he wanted to do. And he's trained, right? He's trained. He's got that grounding. And finally, as you say, he's motivated, right? I mean, American soldiers, get it done, right? And, when I was deployed to Iraq in 2005, before that, I'd heard about the Nintendo generation, where all soldiers wanted to do was go and play video games, soldiers in the Army wanted to go and play video games, right? Then the war happened, and these same soldiers were out there getting it done, bringing the pain, and coming in off patrols. I mean, just great Americans doing great things. And you know what they did when they got back to the CHU? They played Nintendo, yeah. Right? I mean, but so, yeah.
Well, okay, so I think we've done a fair amount of BS in here. Let's go ahead and dive into our main topics for this episode. Let's kick it off with reflecting on my time in the Guard. And I think we'll go ahead and start with the moment I decided that this was where I wanted to go. And it would be at college, senior year, with like a semester left. Like, real life is coming at me fast, and I have no plan. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. And so at that time, I was really conflicted about what was going on. I was super stressed out, nervous about what civilian life was going to look like. I grew up in an active duty family. I didn't see anyone do civilian life. So I really had no idea what I was going to do. And for my longest time, I thought I was just going to go on active duty and everything would be hunky-dory. But I met this girl and ended up getting married to her, and I was thinking, man, shoot, maybe there's something to the civilian life. Maybe I can make more money as a civilian, and maybe I can still serve my country. And so I decided, when I go and lay down in the dirt for the last time, I want to be able to say that I did something greater than myself. But I still want to make money. So I decided the Guard was the way I was going to go. So, yeah, we went through the recruiting route. I probably should have done ROTC But at the time, it just was not for me. ROTC has its advantages and disadvantages, and probably can do a whole episode on that later down the road. But for me, and I can already tell you, the majority of folks that I met at OCS were all in fraternities. Take from that what you will. For me, I had a lack of discipline in college, and I much rather would have gone out to party than go and show up for PT or show up for a lab within ROTC and go do XYZ off in the woods. And I mean, I could go blame the ROTC program I had, which wasn't really stellar, but at the end of the day, it was, if I wanted it enough, I would have stayed in it. But I didn't. And so it put me on the path that I ended up being on.
Yeah, I mean, I find your journey in the National Guard to be pretty fascinating, and you don't do it for the money for sure, right? I mean, drill barely gives you the cost to cover your cost to travel there and back, and but being active duty the entire time, prior to the war, my interaction with the Guard was pretty minimal, and they had a reputation, right? After the war, my perspective on the Guard changed a lot. But seeing what you've done, doing the riot control duties down at Richmond and at the Capitol, and it's profoundly changed my appreciation for the citizen soldier. I kind of hate that term, citizen soldier, because everybody's a citizen soldier, whether they're Guard or active duty. But that term's used for the Guard to highlight the fact that they do this as a part-time gig. And there's some derision because it's part-time.
Yeah.
And yet, as we were commenting prior to starting this, it almost takes more discipline to be successful in the Guard than it does on active duty. You certainly have had just as much opportunity to serve your country.
Yeah. And to kind of build off that is another reason, aside from I like anonymity for this, but another reason why I don't want to show my face and use my name is I could be your neighbor. You don't know who among us is in the Guard, who shoulders that responsibility, who goes and... So, I spent a week straight after work down in North Carolina hitting up Area J on Fort Bragg, doing land nav so I could be successful for OCS. No other... My civilian job was not going to front the bill for that. On active duty, you'd have you could go and have that be supported by your work. So, I took time away from my wife. I was not with her for a whole week, and that was on my own accord, on my own dime, and I spent every night out on Area J trying to get better at these warrior tasks and battle drills. And so yeah, it certainly does take discipline to do these things, and I'm not going to say no one's going to hold your hand to imply that someone's holding your hand on active duty.
Well, they kind of are, though, right? So to give a sort of a corresponding example, when I competed for my EIB, and that we had 2 weeks of train up. My unit did nothing else but prepare to do the EIB, and then it was on 1 week for the EIB test. I was thankful I got my EIB. But to your point, my job was to get ready for EIB, right? It wasn't like I had to go and, run a motor pool or we literally, it was an infantry company, obviously. We literally said we're doing nothing else on the training schedule except EIB prep. And you're right, as a guardsman, you don't have that luxury.
And I want to get my expert soldier's badge. I actually brought it up to my platoon leader, and I was like, "Hey, sir, do you know about this one?" It was so new, he didn't really know what it was. But once I explained to him what it took to go earn this, he was just like, I have no idea where you're going to find the funding, and this is going to have to be 100% on you. You're going to have... And there's weapon systems that I don't touch on a regular basis that are going to be part of the expert soldier's badge that... Like a Mark 19. Let me just run down to Walmart real quick so I can go practice on Mark 19.
That's why I hate it. I've heard people say that National Guardsmen aren't real soldiers. I think it was the governor of New York or the governor of New York City. He was complaining that the Army wasn't there to help with the COVID.
Oh.
And somebody said, "Well, the National Guard there." He said, "Well, that's not the real Army." The hell you say?
Yeah.
The hell you say? I mean, I don't get it. National Guard soldiers go the same basic in IT. They have the same requirements as active duty, and you know what? They die just the same on the battlefield.
Yep. And if I showed up in uniform and performed under expectation, under the minimum standards, I would still be held to that.
Right.
Or at the very minimum, is going to look at me and make fun of me for being below the standard. My first ever SAD duty, my state active duty, was when I volunteered for prep for COVID, when we knew this was coming and we knew that our aid stations and whatnot were going to get overrun. And so I volunteered 2 weeks of my life to go do that. And it was great because I got to hang out with some really good soldiers. I enjoyed that. But I didn't get BAH. I still have rent to pay. I got base E4 pay for that, and that was it. No other entitlements because it was the state funding that mission, and we just didn't have enough tax money to support BAH. So sometimes you can get stuck holding the bag, and you really don't make very much. And okay, yeah, I wasn't catching bullets or anything, but I was still away from my family.
Sacrifice is sacrifice.
And, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I like I said before, I kind of, before the war, right, the National Guard had a little bit of a reputation. It was probably at least somewhat deserved. But then it kind of came to the forefront for me. I served with an officer in Iraq, and he got killed on a convoy. And he was a National Guardsman out of New England somewhere, I think Maine, I'm not entirely sure. He's buried at Arlington. And in that moment, and I liked him a lot, a good officer. He was superior to me at the time. I was only a major. He was a lieutenant colonel. And I was sitting there reflecting at the memorial service in Baghdad and thinking, yeah, National Guardsmen die on the battlefield just the same as active duty ones. So,
it's interesting you say that. I'm thinking about, obviously, the end of this 20-year conflict we've had, and opinions aside, we're moving on to something else. We don't know what that's going to be. God willing, it won't be anything crazy anytime soon. But potentially there is a Cold War that we might be looking at with whomever. I'm not going to speculate because that's not the point of the channel. But let's just say we're moving into another Cold War situation. This kind of hits one of the next topics in the episode about future challenges. I don't want to see my Guard turn into what the Cold War Guard was that you remember, because the Guard excelled and became what it is today because of the war, because we had soldiers who needed to do the job. Right now, standing before soldiers and trying to tell them, getting them to buy into the mission, saying, hey, look, guys, one day you could deploy when there's no war, is going to, I feel like, be a certain challenge to get them to take this training seriously.
So I got to ask you, okay, you're about to be a young second lieutenant in the National Guard. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do, LT? If that's a concern you have, what are you going to do about it?
Tell everyone I was a sergeant and they should trust me.
Yeah, well, that'll get you only but so far, right?
Yeah.
That'll get them to pay attention for the first 5 minutes.
Right.
And then if you're souped up after that, well...
And honestly, my stripes are really just going to be that slight thin veil of a positive first impression.
Right.
That's all that's really about.
That's a fact.
But now without like jumping too far in, as far as trying to get guys to buy in, what I'm going to try to hit them with is maybe turn our guns away from the border overseas and look internally again and say, all right, guys, yeah, sure, we don't have a war overseas anymore, but, we get called upon for pandemics. We get called upon for riots. We get called upon for natural disasters. Like, we've got guys from Iowa driving down to Louisiana right now to aid with the hurricanes. Yeah. Okay, again, you're not catching bullets. Thank God DC didn't turn into that. But we have guardsmen killed all the time in floods because they're out trying to go save people, and they put themselves in the dangerous sections, and they'll get swept away, and, who wants to drown? So I'm going to be an ordnance officer. I'm going to be a maintenance control officer. Not where I wanted to be. Deflates my ego super hard, going from, an engineer who has an active role on the prospective battlefields, who gets called up for riot control and cool things like that. However, I now know, as having been an end user, what this equipment means, and I'm going to tell them, all right, well, let's go ahead and say that Virginia is flooding, and now we need to roll out a whole bunch of engineers to go fix that situation right now. And if their trucks don't run, that's your family down the river.
Yeah, they say there's no such thing as a bad assignment. There's only bad soldiers or bad leaders in this case, right? And again, in Iraq, 2010, this time, my brigade, I was a brigade XO. My brigade commander had something on the wall that said, "Hey, don't count the days, make every day count," and that's resonated with me. I really like that. But the thing that, so I think that the biggest thing that you can do as a young leader in the Guard to maintain sort of that reputation that the Guard has correctly earned through the war, dealing with the riots over the last couple of years and the support for COVID, and the Guard has absolutely distinguished itself. How you maintain that is you set the best example you can as a young officer, right? I got asked, I have a lot of badges, right? And I got asked one time, "Hey, sir, why do you wear all those badges?" And I said, I don't have to wear them, but I wear them because I'm trying to set an example, right? And I had a rule about every badge I got, I used. And in your assignment as an ordnance officer, you be the best ordnance officer that you can be, and you set the example for your soldiers, and that will, at least in part, help maintain that high standard that the National Guard has demonstrated over the last 20 years.
And I'm kind of glad you brought that up, because I was feeling some type of way about. So on my leader's book, my battle book, I've got my now old E5 stripes, followed by OCS, and then the butter bar, which to some people might be like, "Bro, that's OCS, that's soft as hell, like who cares?" I'm trying to go ahead and look at it from other people's perspective. Especially other officers who'd be like, "So it was only OCS." And let's say they don't even know, they didn't go to OCS themselves. And I'm thinking about other soldiers around me when I was within the formation, and how they were scared to even go to BLC to get their stripes, and scared to even go to OCS when they're fully qualified, physically ready, they got their degree, they could do this. Yeah. And all right, so I don't wear a badge for going to OCS, but in a sense, I could be like, yeah, this is what I was, this is what I had to do to get here. And you can come talk to me about achieving that yourself if you'd like.
Yeah, that's an officer's responsibility is to set the example, to say, and being an officer can be pretty thankless because you always have to be switched on. But your soldiers deserve the very best officer that you can be. And you have to set an example. It means a lot of things. Sometimes it means badges. Sometimes it's encouraging. I can't tell you how many times, I didn't really truly appreciate OCS until you went. But I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people who went green to gold or did something else because their officer told that young soldier, "You know what, I think you got what it takes," right? And they set that example, and that young soldier became an NCO or became an officer or became a ranger or became SF or what have you because of the example that their leader set for them. And that's absolutely profound. I hate that there are officers who don't internalize that. I mean, when you stand in front of troops, you have to be the best officer you absolutely can be because your soldiers deserve it. And if you're not up to that task, then go find something else to do.
And the other thing is, it's nice to. So I went and did quote scary things. Coming in, and we've got major changes in basic training now. We're not so as abusive as when I went through. And not that was that long ago. But that's what the junior soldier thinks all Army schools are going to be. I had countless friends think BLC was going to be this FU smoke session, and it really wasn't. It was a professional development school for you want to become the next professional NCO. Let me show you. OCS was not that, but These people are scared of going to these things, and as the officer, you need to go tell people to go do things that they're scared of doing, and it helps if you've gone and done those things, so that you can look at it and be like, yeah, it's scary, but this is what we do about it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? Don't let fear stop you from doing what you want to do. I mean, fear exists for a reason. It alerts you to the danger of a particular course of action, right? But if you let that fear stop you from achieving something you always wanted to do, then when you get close to the end of your time, you look back and go, I wish I had done that. And
Yeah.
don't be that person. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've met somebody after, that we had growing up in this military family, we had a slightly different, unusual career path, and I was stationed at non-traditional Army bases, and we're surrounded by civilians, and they would say things, well, I wish I'd done that, or I could have done that. And my advice to them was, you still can, or your path took you a different way. And the point there, and that's another component of being that officer and setting that example is that, hey, look, I was afraid too. I was afraid too, but I knew I wanted to be this. I knew I had it in me to stand up and do it, and I was willing to accept failure. Right. I mean, the idea that failure is not an option is silly. Right. It's okay to fail. What's really not okay is to never try or to quit. Right. And I would see people quit Ranger School all the time. The hardest day for me in Ranger School was my Ranger buddy quit. He'd open up. He'd use a white lens flashlight at night, and he got a major spot report, and he said, "That's it, I'm done." Right. And I was the closest I came to quitting because he and I were tight. We were working really well together, and he quit. And he said, "I can't hack it." And I guess you could say that he overcome his fear to win, to go to the school. But at the end of the day, I guess my point is, don't let fear get in the way. Give it a shot, and it's okay to fail. It's okay to fail. It doesn't mean anything, right? Not really.
Right. Yeah, I was definitely afraid, and the biggest fear I had about going to OCS was a fear of failure, which is stupid because you can't die of failure.
Right. Right.
But it still hurts. You don't want to
stings.
carry that, right? You don't want to be exposed to that social pain. And in the Guard, we're pretty tight knit within the state. Like, we're not that big. You tend to, once you've been in for even only 3 years, you meet a fair amount of people. So word gets around fast. My old platoon leader texts me and goes, "Hey, I heard you're trying to go to OCS." I'm like, I didn't even say nothing to you. How do you know?
Wow. That's wow.
And so I was scared because I was like, man, if I botch this, then everyone's going to know I suck. But then, I was thinking, F that. As soon as I get back within the formation, if I fail, and look around at all the turkeys who didn't decide to go,
Right.
That's one thing.
One of the things I'm hoping you learned out of this is that you went and did this and you were successful and you graduated. I'm hoping you realize now there's simply nothing, no challenge in life that you could be presented that you could not deal with. Right? Again, that's literally, you think about it, and I posted this to Facebook, but you didn't see it because you don't have a Facebook account, but for thousands of years, men and women have endured these similar rites of passages for the privilege of leading their nation's warriors, right? And there's a reason schools like this exist, because they want to show you that you have what it takes when it's really bad, you still have what it took, right? So the lesson I'm hoping that you internalize is that no matter what happens to you in life, whether it's being a good platoon leader, becoming a company commander, being the tag for Virginia, no matter what, it's still not going to be as bad as OCS,
Yeah.
right? You got it.
Yeah, definitely. If anything, now I've really learned how to pump out artificial confidence, which I think is a vital thing. Because there were definitely a couple of times at OCS when I was getting evaluated, I was like, I have no idea.
Well, you do have to be careful of that. They used to call that FEBA, false enthusiastic bullshit attitude, and you can't fake it in front of soldiers, or you can't fake it. You can kind of fake it for cadre and things like that, but don't ever do that with soldiers, because soldiers always know.
And I guess what I mean by fake confidence, when something doesn't go to plan, as it will almost always will,
yeah.
At that moment, you can't express on your face that, oh, shit, this happened.
Right.
You need to, okay, cool. I can handle this extreme disaster.
Right, you project the idea that
Yes.
I always had
You're
a
in
plan
control.
B.
Yep.
I knew it was going to go to shit, and I had already thought about it.
Yeah.
Yep. You know, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Right,
That is a fundamental component of being a good officer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, I'm not saying like roll up when you have no initial plan. That's a problem. But
Right.
when your initial plan goes to crap, and they're looking at you like make a decision, and you're just smiling like I already have one. No, I didn't, but okay.
Yep.
So
that is the hallmark of a good leader.
One of the final points I'd like to discuss within this pilot here is challenges that I have faced and I plan to face and what I plan to do about it. So challenges that I faced right off the bat when I was an E4, I had a bad attitude about the Guard. When I came out of the training, I was like, this is stupid. I've wasted my time. None of this is serious. I should have just gone active duty. This is a terrible waste of my life. And what saved me was having good leadership. I had a good platoon leader and a good platoon sergeant who gave enough of a damn to be like, okay, I see this person's potential, and I will put them in for awards, I'll put them in for schools, whatever opportunity, even if I didn't ask for the opportunity, they would go, hey, crap, or, hey, are you interested in this opportunity?
Yeah, and conversely, the opposite lesson is something that we should pay attention to. When you have a chain of command, you have leaders that actually don't care. The impact that it has on a unit is profoundly detrimental, right? And we see that all the time. I worried about that. Your brother's on active duty, and I worried about that. I'm like, oh, please God, when they get to their first unit, let it be that they have that platoon sergeant that you're talking about, or that the recruiter you had, right? He said.
The first one or the guy who took up after?
No, I guess the one that got you into basic.
Okay, he was a good guy.
Yeah,
he put me in for my first AAM.
Right, you look at that and going, okay. See, now I can see the merit in what I'm doing here. But again, conversely, when you get that chain of command that's mailing it in or truly doesn't care about soldiers, it derails the hope that you had for being in that Army unit. And I can't abide. I'll have to admit, when I was a young second lieutenant, the first time I was a platoon leader, I was probably that officer. Because I didn't get a lot of leadership instruction through ROTC. Yeah, I had the leadership school of Ranger School. That taught me how to be the best leader.
Leader.
Yeah, but it didn't teach me what it took to be a good platoon leader. And I struggled for my first platoon. I just didn't set a good example. I didn't do what I needed to do for my soldiers, and to my own credit, I recognized that. And I got a chance to be a platoon leader again. And about 6 months into that, my platoon sergeant come to me and said, "Hey, sir, I think you might be the best platoon leader I've ever had." And I was like, "Wow!" I needed that, because the lessons that we learned, is that who I am as a leader really matters, both positive and negative. And if I really want to be successful at this, then I should make every effort to be the best leader I can be.
Yeah. All right. So to build off of that, having good leaders and their ability to retain soldiers within the formation.
Yeah, that was actually a question I wanted to ask you was, okay, what are you going to do about that soldier who doesn't give a shit? Right, and you've met him.
Oh yeah.
Right, you've met him. Right,
oh, yeah.
That soldier
who's not getting discharged, by the way.
Yeah, So okay, so what if he shows up in your formation? What are you going to do?
I would do what my command had done up until like the 6-month mark. There was a particular soldier who just refused to show up for drills, for major events such as riots and other moments where his brothers and sisters in arms needed him to be there.
Yeah.
We needed the numbers. Like, we had 800 people outside Richmond, and we had maybe 3 platoons.
Yeah, see, that's another profound leadership lesson, is when that person doesn't show up to fulfill their responsibilities, which you're not only letting the unit down, but some other Bubba's got to carry your load, both literally and figuratively, right? I mean, if there's mission essential equipment and that person's not there to haul it, guess what? That stuff gets distributed across the platoon, and now everybody else is carrying that load.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, but to answer your question, the The reason why this person didn't have any negative actions, separation has not been started, is because there wasn't an appropriate paper trail to support it. And that comes down to laziness within the Guard.
Well, that's hard.
We get faced with the problem in the Guard during the drill weekend, and then we get released. And like I say, we have all these plans for next drill, but then life happens in between. The job that actually puts food on the plate or on the dinner table takes precedence, and we don't counsel and we don't follow up. And so the soldier didn't have enough. We didn't have paperwork on him to start separation. And at the end of the day, when you got the butter bar, I know I'm going to be in the situation, but it's going to suck. But you have to go ahead and turn to that platoon sergeant and say, "Platoon sergeant, where are we on this paperwork?" And then he should turn to the squad leaders and ask them. And you got to constantly hound them throughout the month, not to an excessive point where you're bleeding into their family life and their civilian career, but enough to where we have to counsel. That's one big thing that I want to change in my platoon, is I'm going to counsel soldiers positively and negatively.
Yeah, I mean, I do it all the time. I counsel quarterly. Every formation I've led, I've counseled my senior leaders down as far as I could. But the other thing is that if you don't, not only are you doing a disservice to your unit, right, the squad, the platoon, the company, whatever, by allowing someone to stand in the formation that's not contributing, you're also doing a disservice to that soldier themselves, right? Because maybe they have the potential to do well, but if they don't ever get any feedback, and it's not just junior enlisted or NCOs. I had when I was a brigade level commander, I had a lieutenant colonel who wasn't cutting the mustard. I pulled him in for quarterly counseling, and I laid it out to him and said, "You're not meeting the standard." And his response to me was, "Hey, sir, no one's ever told me this before." Right? And I'm like, "You're kidding? Are you serious?" He's like, "No, I've never heard this before."
No one's had the personal courage to do that. It's hard to.
Yeah, I mean, I consider that a fundamental, but but it is hard.
It's hard to go look at your peers or other people in general and tell them, "Hey, you suck."
Now, to compound it, right, active duty soldier, I would do my counseling during the duty day. National Guardsmen, at least the prep, you're not doing that on the drill weekend. You got to do that on your own time.
Right. You might have to call the soldier up, and that is a nightmare, especially if it's a negative counseling, because he's not picking up.
Right. I mean, that's frankly, that's just not an issue that you have to contend with on active duty. Like, hey, platoon sergeant, go get PFC Snuffy in here.
Wake him up, get him out of the barracks, and have him drive in here.
Right.
That's not happening on the Guard.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah, that's right.
So, because we got, I'm trying to keep this within a reasonable time frame, so I'd say we got maybe about 10, 15 minutes left here to discuss some more challenges I think we'll face in the future and how I plan to overcome them. Major challenges. I was a junior NCO of having been in for 3 years. I don't really know very much, especially because it wasn't my full-time job. You could go ahead and hit me with some sort of AR, whatever the hell, stump the chump question, and I wouldn't really know what to tell you.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's going to require me to actually hit the books and learn. And in my first PL, he knew a lot about being in the Army when it came to the regulations, what the book said. Because he took the time and he
did the homework.
That. Yeah, he did the homework, and I want to be that as well, because I don't want to be that guy. Yeah. Even in the Guard, when someone asks me, "Hey, how does my retirement work?"
Right.
I'm like, "Oh,
yeah.
I don't know."
I mean, I'll give you another personal example. Was that I was going to infantry officer basic, and I went to a buddy's room, and he's working on his battle book, and I hadn't put any time on my own battle book, and I said, "What were you working on?" "I'm doing my battle book," and he was working on hand and arm signals, and I said stupidly, I said, "Well, if you don't know that by now, then that's your problem, right?" And he said, "Okay, fine." Well, and he gave me a hand signal. He said, "Tell me what this is," and I didn't know what it was, right? And I took that as a lesson. He did his homework. I hadn't, and I'd be damned if that was going to happen again. Unfortunately, it did. Unfortunately, it did, right? But to your point, though, is that you do have to do the homework.
Yeah. So how I plan to commit to overcoming that is through this, and even if we've got 9 subscribers, which is pretty freaking sweet. I mean, it's better than the none that I
Woo!
thought.
Paying subscribers?
No, definitely not. But hey, no, 9 people decided it was
That's right.
worthwhile to listen to us talk about watches
Right.
and crap. And hopefully
Right.
this will be some more profound stuff that you want to listen to, and we'll get some more folks on board. And I don't know if I'm going to put out stuff weekly because it does take a lot of time. I work 2 jobs. So I'm going to say once a month. And maybe we'll talk about various topics. And even my wife has volunteered to go ahead and read some of these regulations so that it's on audio format. Because I've been trying to find
my
audio
God.
format of these stupid dry ARs. And so her and I are going to tag team that, maybe put something
Wow.
together. So 1, I've read it, and 2, you can listen to it.
Wow, there are a lot of Army regulations.
Well, I'll go look through some pertinent ones that I care about.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, start with AR 670-1.
Uh,
That's sort of
I
foundational.
printed that thing out.
Yeah, it's big. It's big. But so I want to say thank you. I mean, one, father to son. I've really enjoyed spending time with this way. It's intensely gratifying, particularly because I get to highlight your accomplishments as my son, as a young man. The things that you've done to me are. I spent 30 years on active duty, and I just don't think I accomplished the same in the same amount of time that this brief period of time you've been in the National Guard. And I mean that sincerely. Your accomplishments are breathtaking. And I'm happy to discuss this, and if people online find it interesting to listen to, so much the better. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, definitely. So, with that being said, always ready, always there. Minuteman out.